Hello, my name is Hilary Rose and this is the Live Wild podcast. In this episode, I have the absolute honour of chatting to Master Shaman, Hamilton Souther. Hamilton is based in Peru and he offers retreats and guidance to those wanting to transform themselves through the use of sacred plants. For the last 20 years, he's helped celebrities, CEOs and ordinary folks on their plant medicine journey, keeping them safe and helping them make incredible changes in their lives.
And I think as a society, we put too much credence and energy into the worst of the worst and the stories and identifications associated with it. And we then retell that story millions of times instead of thinking about the millions of positive things happening every single day in the face of the fact that we've had the worst of the worst. And so what I see is that really we have in our lives a tremendous amount of positive. We have a tremendous amount of supportive. We have a tremendous amount of the help of nature. We have a tremendous amount of help from earth, et cetera, all the time. And that gives us the ability to identify with those deep traumas. And so I help people realize that there's many, many more positive experiences than negative ones. The negative ones are just very loud in our psyche.
I loved this chat so much. He is so full of wisdom and love for what he does. It just emanates out of him. So if you've been lucky enough to receive sacred plant medicine like ayahuasca or San Pedro, then this chat is for you. If you're just curious about it, then this chat is also for you. And just to say that these ceremonies are not to be taken lightly. Plant medicine should be respected and engaged with safely. I hope you enjoyed the chat as much as I did.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person.
Likewise.
Virtually in person.
Virtually in person, likewise. Hamilton Souther,
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning on the Live Wild podcast. It's we've been trying to organize this for quite some time, so we finally got here. So thank you for your patience. There's a million questions that I want to ask you, and we could be here for a whole week. So, but I won't keep you that long. I guess the first one is for people who don't know what you do or what ayahuasca is. I know you've probably answered this question a million times, but if you can talk us through what is ayahuasca and how does it help people?
Yeah, well, what I do is I'm an advocate for Amazonian medicinal plants, and I'm a visionary leader and a master shaman. I became a master shaman in my early 20s. And ayahuasca is a mixture of plants that form a tea. And two main plants are the vine of ayahuasca, which is scientifically known as Banisteriopsis caapi, and the leaves of the chacruna tree, which is Psychotria vidris. And the two of them combine to form a tea that's a plant medicine that has a variety of really incredible properties associated with it. It's known for healing all different kinds of psychological problems that people have: depression, anxiety, PTSD, addictions. It can help them through trauma and issues from the past, get over relationships, difficulties that they've had. Really anything that has to do with our psychology. And then on the psychiatric side of it, it has an incredible ability to balance brain chemistry, to be able to support people to get more from benefit from their own neurotransmitters, balance their serotonin levels, really awaken and reset the brain on a physiological level, which is still being studied and I think very fascinating.
Fascinating indeed. It is just a whole level of healing that can happen, across mental, physical, spiritual. It's really, really mind-blowing. Like how I found you was actually your story. So I was researching ayahuasca. I became so interested in it. I started listening to a lot of different podcasts, and what caught my attention was your story, your own personal story, which is quite phenomenal, really. And you can correct me on any of this because it's your story, but this is just from an outsider what I recall listening to.
Sure.
And I say this with respect, but I think is it fair to say that maybe you're a middle-class American college student that I think was on track to becoming possibly a pro golfer, and then through a sequence of events had this very deep calling to go into the Amazon and become a master shaman. I mean, you couldn't really write that stuff. If you wrote that as a screenplay, people would be like, that's a bit far-fetched. But yet it's like, can you talk me through like before your awakening, how that happened, what the process was, and what were the steps you actually took to get to the Amazon?
There is a thread through all of that that brings some credibility to it. It's an interesting kind of series of events. I studied anthropology in college, and I was interested in cultures, and I was interested in deep history and living cultures that still had connection to that deep history. And post university, I was practicing to be a professional golfer. That's true. I was pursuing that at that time. It was a passion in my youth. And I turned to what were kind of cutting edge spiritual sports psychology ideas to address the improvement in my game. And then through that, I quickly started to have kind of deeper experiences. I would just say it was kind of easy for me to have those experiences. And then it came to a point in my life where really through the direction of my mom, I gave my life to spirit.
Wow.
And that was like the first big leap. And when I gave my life to spirit, I didn't believe in spirit or spirituality. I was okay with meditation and those kinds of concepts, but anything beyond that was outside my frame of reference. And when I did that act, it actually occurred. It wasn't something I could take back. I couldn't walk it back after I did it. And within a very short period of time, I started to have an awakening. That was the trigger to the awakening. And the awakening included having extrasensory experiences that could be called visions, and also presences that could be called spirits. And they were corroborated by many other people and seers that I didn't tell about this and was going on. They saw them and they told me about it and stuff. And so that was so whelming. It wasn't overwhelming. It was just very whelming. It was so outside the frame of reference that I had been, working with before, that I put a lot of focus and energy into it to understand what was happening. And when I did that, it accelerated the process. And so instead of just having an awakening and then moving on from it, I really got into it, and that accelerated the nature of the awakening. And I started doing journeys and deep meditations and trances into the experiences and into the presence of these beings and these other states of consciousness and the extraordinary that I was experiencing at that time. And I was told I was going to go to Peru, and I was told what website to go to buy my ticket. I was told the price of my ticket before I found it. I was told where I would go. I was told in meditation. So I would do a meditation. I would come out of the meditation with a direction. Then I would do another meditation, and just a meditation, no visionary plants or any other kinds of psychedelics or anything like that. Just a sober meditation. And I would come out with a clear direction on where I was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do the next day. And I would just go and do it and test as a test if that could have been true. And it turned out to all be true. I went down to Peru. I found my apprenticeship. There were people waiting for me. They had visions of me for a long time. They agreed to train me. They took me through formal apprenticeship, and I ultimately graduated from that as a Master Shaman.
There's so much even within that I want to unpack. So going back to your mum, did she have a spiritual practice that she was possibly the catalyst or part of the catalyst for you to go down this road? Or was it just something that came through her in that moment?
She had been awakening to her own spirituality, I would say, in the previous 5 years to that moment. It was something that was dormant within her, and then she was opening up to it, and she was finding spirit, and it was outside my frame of reference. Like, we didn't grow up that way. So she was discovering that for herself and had started to do these kinds of meditations and journeys and things. And she thought it could help me. And so that's why she offered that as a solution at that time.
Wow. And so before you even got to the Amazon, did you know much about psychedelics? Had you tried psychedelics at that point, or was this all just a whole new field opening up to you? Pardon the pun.
I mean, I knew that I knew they existed. I had very little experience with them of any kind, and I went to Peru having heard about ayahuasca specifically from two people. I'd heard of two people that had taken it, And I had read one book that had an account of it, of this person's experience in it. So those are my 3 touch points before going down. I didn't go to Peru thinking I was going to end up in specifically ayahuasca and ayahuasca practices. I didn't know. I was just told I was going to Peru and that there were people waiting for me and they were shaman. I didn't know anything else other than that. And so it wasn't this specific kind of plant or these practices. It was, these teachers are waiting for you. You need to go. They're going to teach you, was the direction. And so it just turned out to be lineage of ayahuasca shaman and plant medicine practitioners. They go by the name médico vegetalistas. They're considered doctors of plant medicines. So they were specialists of 5 kinds of plant medicine. Ayahuasca was one of them, mapacho tobacco, the sanangos, which are a variety of, they call them sanango or sananga medicinal plants, medicinal trees, and toei.
Toei is that beautiful long flower, isn't it? Toei? It's kind of
it's called the angel trumpet vine. And at least in the United States, the local name is angel trumpet vine.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. So what did you think was going to happen when you went down there? You know, you said you didn't know you're going to end up in an ayahuasca lineage or plant medicine lineage. I'm trying to get my head around this level of intuition you had at that time to just trust yourself to go with the information that was given. And what did you think was going to happen? Or was it just this wide open adventure for you what age were you actually at that point?
I just turned 23.
Wow. Okay. Very young.
Yeah. What I thought that nothing would happen. I thought that this was going to be like a terrible folly of errors and would make a good screenplay or a story about this kid who gets these ideas and he goes down to South America and he comes back with a bunch of ideas. That's what I thought. I had no idea. I was deeply at that time I didn't pray, but I was praying within myself, right? In myself, I was deeply hoping that that somebody out there knew something about this earth. I was hoping that there was deeper knowledge and wisdom about life and why we were all alive. And I was hoping there was more and I was hoping it was going to come from our deep history and our deep cultures. I was hoping there was something to this place. I was kind of at a kind of standstill within myself between what seemed like a lot of suffering and frivolity. So it seemed like life was frivolous and filled with suffering, and those didn't seem to combine well, like oil and water. I can't do this for 80 years of frivolity to be suffering the whole time I'm having frivolous experiences. What is this place? There's got to be something more going on here that I'm not grasping. Does anybody, hello out there? Hello, does anybody know anything about this place?
That's a very existential moment to be having as a 23-year-old.
I felt like there was an illusion in front of me, and
you were right.
I couldn't see through it. I'm like, what's this illusion? I can't get through the illusion, and I was so hoping that there was somebody that knew something about this. So I thought it would be a great adventure, and I needed to test. I needed to test what was happening to me.
Wow!
Because I sought support when this happened. And I sought spiritual support, I sought shamanic support, and I sought psychological support. And the psychologist told me to go. The psychologist said, "You're fine. You don't have a problem. You have to go deal with this.
Oh,
go."
Wow.
And then and the shaman said, "You can't get out of this. You have to go." And the spiritual people were saying, the beings we're seeing are telling you have to go. What do I do? I didn't tell the spiritualist of the beings. I'm oh no, this is what has happened. There's been a rupture in space-time. What has happened here? So I was sent, and so I had to see that and test it for myself. The scientist in me needed proof. And I got it. Everything unfolded the way it was laid out. And it ended up becoming a very eccentric life path for that period of time. Now it's becoming more accepted, but It was,
Mm.
it was very unique at that time.
Did your family support
Been
you?
beautiful.
Yeah. Did your family support you? Or were they like, oh, here, what's he at now?
Well, I think it was outside their frame of reference. They
Yeah.
supported me going.
Mm.
I think it was harder for them when I decided to stay. And then they needed to come have the experience. It wasn't
Mm.
just I went to Peru to find this, prophesized apprenticeship.
Mm.
The location of the apprenticeship then became the next big challenge and hurdle. So I made it to Peru. I did the apprenticeship. I did the journey to the apprenticeship. I found my apprenticeship, but I found it from the city of Iquitos, which is the most remote, largest city in the world. It was a 24-hour overland journey to get to the place where I was going to actually live and apprentice. And you went from the Amazon River to the Ucayali River. You branched off the Ucayali River to a tributary. You crossed that to a bunch of lagoons. You crossed that to another river. You went up that river past the last native settlement. You went past that another 30, 40 minutes to a cluster of homes that were spread out over 6 or 7 river bends. And that was it. There were no people living out there. And then I was bequeathed the last area, like the next bend up river, to put a house. I built my own house out there to be able to live because I was told in the ayahuasca visions that I had to live there. Why?
That's a whole level of
Why do
trust,
I,
right?
why do I have to be here? Like, what are you talking about? How am I going to live here? I don't know how to live here.
Yeah.
You don't know you don't even know how to walk there. Like, what do you mean? You don't know how to, how do you get around? Like, it's not the same. You're in there were no roads. There was nothing. There were footpaths that connected the houses, and upriver from me, which is right outside my door, was uninhabited jungle. And it was uninhabited for days. So,
Wow.
what am I doing out there is the first series of questions that I had. So, it just turned out that the guy that had been having the visions of me was 500 yards away.
Okay. Well,
So
then
I
when you,
had to go there
yeah.
because he was the guy who was going to train me and teach me. And that's where he lived. He just lived out there. That was his home. He was
Wow.
at home in the forest, in the jungle. He was in his 80s. And he was going to become my teacher. And he was the one who was going to accept me into his lineage. And
Wow.
so I had to stay there. So I think when my family realized I was going to be living there in my early 20s, I think they had to come down and see it, and then they had to come down and experience why. And then they were shown in their ayahuasca visions going on.
Wow. Was there resistance within the lineage when you were being accepted into it? I mean, I presume that, there's a whole, I mean, you're going to have better terminology to describe this than I would, but a whole village or a whole community of people that are involved in this particular lineage. And I would imagine it's quite sacred to them. So was there resistance from a Westerner to come into that?
It was taboo. It wasn't even
Wow.
resistance. It was
Wow.
fundamentally not allowed. It goes
Oh,
way beyond the notion of laws and breaking laws. It was taboo to train foreign people.
wow.
And it caused a really big problem. It caused a huge cultural shift at that time, caused a lot of antagonism. There was a lot of threats of different kinds of danger over those decisions, and it caused a lot of conflict. It was a very big deal at that time. This was the very end of the lineages at that time not sharing and not being open to outside support.
Okay.
The lineages were dying. Many of them were dying in their own right. The children had already been introduced to Western capitalist goods. They were not interested in learning. There was very little interest in the traditional medicine compared to the new onset of small local medical outposts that would give out pills and shots.
Mm.
Uh, the culture was shifting within the region, and there was very little outside interest at that time in the practices, in the ancestral practices. And so I think that there was a kind of a, well, what do we do? There's no one else.
Mm.
There's no next generation to carry this forward. It was passed down generation by generation by generation. And at that time, there was very little interest in that. Fast forward 20 years, there's now an incredible amount of interest in it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
rekindled and restimulated that, both for the indigenous, the mestizo lineages, and for Westerners. It's now become quite popular and something of tremendous interest, and everything has been revived. But at that moment in time, things were shifting.
It's a beautiful thing to see it revived across the world, I believe, as well, because I think every lineage, every country, every culture actually has their own practice, but it's been so deeply buried under layers of, a lot of stuff. But it's coming to this. There's a lot of stuff that's been buried underneath.
A lot of stuff. Yeah. Sadly, yes, a lot.
Yeah. But I think it's really wonderful to see, even if the inspiration comes from another culture. Like, I mean, I was lucky enough to receive ayahuasca, and because of that, I started to investigate my own culture and what was on offer here, and the lineage that comes through Ireland and beyond. It's a beautiful revival, that's happening at the moment, that I think has such potential to it. Can you tell me about your very first experience of ayahuasca? What was that like for you?
Well, the first one, I think, is so important because I'm going in a state of consciousness from never having had this experience. And after it, everything was going to be different. I will have had the experience.
Mm.
And so I think what makes it so unique is that I had so little understanding or information about what was really going to happen. And I went into the forest. I went on this journey out into the forest. I was being guided at that time to where I was going. It was part of seeking the apprenticeship. And there was also a lot of doubt and confusion at that time, because I had been now going on the path for, a number of months looking for the apprenticeship and finding, an interesting adventure, but haven't yet to find the apprenticeship. So there's also this buildup of doubt. The days are clicking away. The apprenticeship has not appeared. I don't understand. And so I'm going out to seek a vision, which is the vision about the apprenticeship. So I have a purpose behind the ceremony as well. I've been told you can have a vision. And I wasn't like vision seeking on the apprenticeship. I was looking for these people that were supposed to help me. And so I thought I would go to ayahuasca to look for a vision and see what came from it and have the experience. And I also had a lot of doubt that it could be anywhere as intense as the way people had described it. I just couldn't fathom how you could go from that paradox of frivolity and suffering to something so impactful. I mean, the guy in college who told me about it, his evidence for the experience was, whoa, God. That was it. His whole thing was just, whoa, God. And then he wouldn't talk about it anymore. And so I didn't understand that. That was his, he would talk about other things, but that was that. So it's like, okay, I get it. So, okay. So we go in. It was nice because I had an opportunity to help make the ayahuasca. I learned about it in the forest. It was just the shaman and myself. There was a guide there watching, who I'm glad was there, just simply because in the experience, I probably would have tried to run away if he hadn't been there. I was given ayahuasca. The night came for the ayahuasca. It was a series of events coming up to it that weren't the most relaxing. I was really scared, and so I was going to go fishing, and I went fishing, and I'm sitting on a root on the riverbank, and I didn't know there was a poisonous snake coiled up under it about 6 inches from my bum. And then that became this whole thing about having to extract me from the snake, and that was like, 45 minutes to an hour before the ceremony. So that was also a fear of mine, is that you'd, be bitten by a snake, and et cetera, et cetera. So like these things were leading up to it were very intense. And then we sat down as nightfall came, and I was given this cup of ayahuasca. I didn't have a frame of reference, but my mindset at that time was just doubting and wondering. So I'm like, oh, was I given enough? It wasn't that I was given enough. I was given like 5-10 times too much, like way more than I would have needed. And so I drank it. I'm like, oh, why do people throw up? This doesn't make any sense. It felt so good. It felt so home. It felt so right. Everything felt so perfect. And then 15 minutes go by, and somewhere between like probably 15 and 17 minutes, I start seeing the air become pixelated.
Oh, wow.
I start seeing space-time become pixelated.
Mm.
I'm on this riverbank, and the river's about 30, 40 yards wide. And so you can see the entire forest growing up there. And I can see like the energy of the forest, and I can see it becoming alive and aware of me.
Wow.
And I closed my eyes and I opened my eyes. And in the moment it took to close my eyes and open my eyes, the pixelation had become multidimensional geometric shapes.
Wow.
And I took a breath, and I felt very, very nauseated. Like I knew I was going to throw up. And I thought to myself, if it doesn't get stronger, I'll be okay. And it kept getting stronger for the next 4.5 to 5 hours.
Oh, that's intense.
And it just started from there. Like it was at that point that the shaman started to shake the shakapa, which makes a shk, shk sound.
Mm-hmm.
And every shk like that, and that all those geometric patterns would move. Everything would move, space-time would move, energy would move, the whole field moved. And then I just started to get sick. And I threw up and threw up and threw up and threw up. But there was this psychological component associated with it.
Mm.
At first, I just threw up, not understanding. And then I started to muse on things that were difficult for my life. And I tried to gather my thoughts, but I couldn't. I tried to get out of the psychological state, but I couldn't. I resisted the experience. It didn't matter. I had fanciful thoughts like I could shapeshift into a jaguar and just run into the forest.
Oh.
Like get away from this thing. Couldn't do that. And then at that point, it still hadn't even really started yet. This was just onset. This was just barely starting. Oh yeah. And then it really started. And when it started, I sat down and I said, okay. I remember sitting down and saying, okay, you have to survive this.
Wow.
Okay, you have to survive this. If you don't survive this, you're going to die. Like you have to survive this. You have to. So pull it together. Like get it together. And I sat down and I started to focus. And when I did, this vortex opened up and it started to pull me in. It had gravitas to it, and it started to pull me into it. And as I went into it, my psyche would fragment. And every place my psyche would fragment, it would become like a strobe light. And it would flash images of anything in my life that didn't have integrity or wasn't cohesive. Any negativity, any negative word, any negative thought, any negative interaction, any negative experience, any negative story, any negative feeling at the way that I had experienced them, the order that I had experienced them in. And it was like thousands a day you experienced of just minute, tiniest little expressions of the self and psyche that was just uncomfortable. And it just would come out, and I had to resolve it all. I had to bring forgiveness and love and acceptance and let it go to all of it. And it was coming at me at a speed that I couldn't deal with. It was thousands a second. And I had to try to treat it like all of them at once. Like I just forgive it, I forgive it, I forgive it. And when I couldn't, I would throw up. And I did that for probably 3 to 4 hours. Oof. And at the end of 3 to 4 hours, I couldn't even sit up anymore. I was just lying in the dirt on the forest floor. And at that point, the shaman came over to me, and I thought I made it this far. I can't now, but I knew I wasn't done. I had made it this far, and I knew that I had had something very special and impactful happen. It was terrifying, but it was amazing. Like this was phenomenal. I've been shedding layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, like millions of layers of the onion. But I couldn't get the last thing out, and it was wretched inside of me. It was horrific, and I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't get it out, and it didn't make any sense to me, and I didn't have a way to, and it just wouldn't come, and I was still stuck in the vortex, and it was still terrifying. And the shaman came over to me, and he blew smoke over me. He blew tobacco smoke over me. And I remember it hitting me, the secondhand smoke of it, and I just thinking what a terrible smell it was, just like overwhelmed by it. But I breathed it in, I didn't have any choice. I was like surrounded in this cloud. I breathed it in, and as I did, it went in me, and it became alive. And I felt hands start to squeeze from my stomach, and they started to walk up my stomach, from my stomach to my esophagus, and up my esophagus all the way to my throat. And as it came to my throat, I felt my jaws unhinge. I felt my mouth become magnitudes larger than it normally is. I felt my whole throat expand, and a physical object the size of a small lemon came out of me. And it was on the ground. It was, I could barely move. So I spit it out over here, and I was over here, and my eyes were open, and it was the size of a small lemon. It was oblong in that shape. It was completely smooth on the outside. It had liquid around it. It was not liquid itself. It was pulsating neon green and yellow. And it was on the ground, and I could see it. And little by little, over the course of minutes, it dissolved down into a kind of puddle of liquid that was not vomit, and it was thicker and oily and a foreign substance to my body. And it had come out of me. And when it did, that sickness and illness and depression and wretchedness and darkness that I had known in life, and fear and anxiety and everything, was gone. And it
Wow.
came out physically, and it was miraculous. It was a miraculous thing. I still don't have a way to put what it is or was in words, but it does happen in ceremony. And it happened, and it came out. And when it did, that the vortex was gone. And instead of there being a vortex, there was this ascension. And I just started to float, and I felt like I was floating up and up and up and up. And as I did, everything got brighter and lighter and more beautiful and brighter and lighter and ecstatic. And the energies and vibrations all shifted, and everything became rainbowic, like all the rainbow colors, but through everything, and all the patterns danced. And as I did that, more and more and more beings or spirits were there, these little
Mm.
light shapes and figures, and that from the forest and from my past and from people and from what looked like angels and what looked like light beings and things from mythology were all there. And there was this great rejoicing and this great elation and ecstaticness amongst the whole space. And the ceremony concluded with a very clear message, which was the celebration of finding my apprenticeship.
Wow. That's a real dark night of the soul moment, isn't it? To go through that and then stay the course. And, well, I suppose you can stay the course, or you can be dragged through it. So it's like you have to make that decision in that moment to go with it. That's phenomenal. Have you seen that happen in ceremony with other people as well?
Yes, it's not like every ceremony common, but it is fairly common that people will have different kinds of objects come out of them. And they're in the bucket then, after it happens. It's a kind of physical release of some kind of toxin or buildup in the body. And the ayahuasca and the combination of you and your psyche and spirit have a way of pulling it into the body and having it expelled. And I think that that's very important to understand in the space, because there's a lot of, I don't know, I think talk in the ayahuasca culture about fear about throwing up, or fear of having to use the bathroom during a ceremony, and not wanting to have that kind of experience because it's related to being sick or having drunk too much alcohol or food poisoning or something like that, or having the flu. And I would like to just share with people that it's actually a miraculous thing to be able to expel from the body something that is causing you illness and sickness. And that there's a purpose to it. It's not I drank ayahuasca, and now because I drink ayahuasca, I'm poisoned myself and I'm sick and now I'm throwing up. It's the opposite of that. So you drink this incredible medicine, the spirit medicine. It has found illness in the body, and it's now coming out. And when it comes out, it liberates you from having had this in the body. It has residues of environmental toxins, residues of substance-oriented toxins from the things that we've eaten and consumed in our lives, and psychological kinds of toxins and poisons as well. And when they come out of the body, you are liberated from them. And so it's actually something purposeful and very beautiful.
And yeah, I mean, I can confirm that short experiences that I've had with ayahuasca. I've had purges like that, and yes, they're very difficult in those moments when and the very first, I'll never forget the very first purge that I had. It was like this big energetic blockage kind of between my guts and my heart, and it was like somebody had gotten, like, I don't know, a 4x4 plank of wood and had shoved it down, and it was so blocked I couldn't shift it, and it was so uncomfortable. And I knew when that kind of feeling started, I was like, okay, this has got to go. I know this has got to go. So I'm just going to stay the course with this and just let it come out at the rate it's supposed to come out at. But like you say, the elation after a purge is amazing, because it's cleansing, it's clearing whatever it is physically or energetically from the body. It was quite the experience. I mean, it's not terribly pleasant as it's happening, but it's worth it. It's worth the purge in the end, definitely. What's the most, like, what are the biggest challenges you face in ceremony when you're hosting for other people? And I suppose there must be a level of feeling so responsible for people in this really vulnerable state as they transition through what they're transitioning through. Like, what's the biggest challenge for you in those moments? Hey, if you're enjoying this episode and you'd like to show your support, if you like, you can buy us a coffee using the Buy Me a Coffee app or online at buymeacoffee.com/livewildpodcast, or just click the link in our show notes, it will take you there. Alternatively, you can also donate crypto to the show using the BitDonate app or at bitdonate.com and search for Live Wild, or just follow the link in the show notes. Either or both those donations really help us make the best show possible. And as always, you can like, subscribe, and share the show with your mates or on social media. Thank you so much for your help.
I think the biggest challenge is that you don't have the right in that ceremony because of the role and the responsibility to break down or have it become too much.
Okay.
And so no matter what the ceremony brings, you have to be able to rise to that occasion to deal with it. And you also drink ayahuasca too in the ceremony. So, what's unique about visionary plant ceremonies is that the real practitioners are also in the ceremony with the participants or the patients. And so as we go through those shifts in consciousness together, it can be very intense. And as the ayahuasca kicks in, it can be really intense. You have to go from your, what I call the talking about it state of consciousness to the doing it state of consciousness. And the talking about it's very different than the doing it. And that transition. So I talk about it during the day, and then at night we're going to do it. And we have to switch channels from the talking about it to doing it. That experience of onset, when it can get very strong and those heavy purging, it can be very intense. And so you just have to, it's like the exact opposite of trying to do something about it. You just have to be calm and breathe. You just have to sit and stay centered. I like to use a small towel with cool water on it because the body can get very hot. And just very calmly put it on the crown and cool the crown down. Very calmly calm the body down. Use intention and breathe. I found over the years that the calmer you can be, the more centered you can be, the easier it is to transition through these different phases of the ceremony. So often the ceremony, because the body is whelmed and impacted so much, it makes you want to act it out. It makes people want to actually bring that into their actions, what's going on. And so I found that the best thing to do is actually disengage from that and just sit there and let it move through that phase. That's really the greatest challenge. Other than that, it becomes something that you've mastered. It becomes something that you know how to engage. Early on, the hardest things was being able to deal with the energies. The energetic forces were like what you would imagine, like being inside a tornado or being inside a hurricane or something like that. It's like, if you see like the palm trees that are bent over like this, about to break, that's what it feels like early in training. It's just you don't have the ability to be in there yet, But and so you just feel like whoosh, it's so intense. But I learned to love that during apprenticeship and training. I learned to actually love how intense that could be. But now it's not like that. Now it's much more of a sitting practice. It's much more of a
Mm,
deep meditative practice
mm.
for me. Um, and so I think in terms of challenges, it's yeah, it's just moving through the stages and knowing that you have to always be there for everybody at the same time.
How many people do you generally have in a ceremony when you're hosting?
Um, well, I think the ceremonies go anywhere from 15 people to 50,
Wow.
and generally are in the 30s, usually
Mm.
30 to 40. And then virtually I'll hold ceremonies that can have 50 to 100, sometimes, between 100 and 1,000.
Wow. Virtually. So how then do you operate in that realm if it's virtually and you've got so many people? That's that's like herding cats.
It's a big universe.
Yeah.
It's a really big universe. You can, there's enough room for everybody. I keep trying to explain to everybody. Once the container is the universe, we're all in it together. Just
Yeah.
stay in there. Like, stay in the universe together. I I developed techniques for that. I saw that one of the problems we were going to have of utilizing these kinds of healing to help a larger group of people, because they came from tribes. So we have to understand tribes are very
Mm,
small groups, and was
mm,
that people would gather around the practitioners, and there was a question and issue just about how to reach everybody that had these needs, and so very few people compared to the need could come to the Amazon and have these experiences. So circa 2012 to 2015, I was looking for ways that we could share this with the rest of the world and have larger numbers of people. And so I started to develop methods for that. And I created a method that I call sanctuary,
mm,
that we all together create a sanctuary. It's a definition for the ceremony and for the space and the state of consciousness that we're going into. That's a universal state that we can all share.
mm.
And so we start, wherever we are in the world. And as we go into the meditation and into the trance, we all unite within that space and we're all together.
Wow. Back to your training. What was probably the most frightening thing you had to go through? Was it challenges from other shamans, or was it, having people's lives in your hands, essentially?
Yeah, the greatest fear is the fear of the unknown and the fear of death,
Mm,
and that you're going to find something in the unknown and in death that's going to be overwhelming to you. That's
yeah.
the continuous nature of fear. And so that plays itself out when you have a healing situation, like
Mm,
mid-afternoon, someone in a canoe shows up. It's a mother holding a baby, and the baby is, unconscious and is looking like the baby's going to die.
mm,
And they're just crying and saying, "Help me." You have to. And if you don't, your career is over.
mm,
You failed. And then the challenges from other shaman are very intense, and that can also be very scary.
mm.
But really, it's that exploration into the unknown and facing death, and um, accepting, in essence, fate in that sense. Like you can't give up until the very end. You can't turn and run away. And then I think being confronted by extraordinary and mystical experiences that are in the physical world. So you can't just blame them on a plant medicine ceremony or a
Yeah.
hallucination or something like that. It's when the paranormal becomes real and sci-fi is no longer just on a TV, that and that the forest is very alive. I think
Yeah.
those were probably the most intense experiences.
Yeah, I have found that when the paranormal become normal, it's like, oh dear, what's really happening here?
What's
Um,
happening? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's definitely a challenge that comes up. I was going to ask you a question, but we've probably covered this already. And I was going to ask you, when you're deep in medicine, is your sole focus on the people in your ceremony, or is there room for you to expand or explore, or even to have like massive insights, or do you have to just park that in ceremony and go, no, my focus is everybody else, or is there a theme that comes through in ceremony through the individuals and their experiences? Because I know obviously it's a collective consciousness, but do you have time to register with that, or are you just solely focused on the individuals?
It's a great question. I like to work in a way where anything we talk about becomes the intention for the ceremony.
Mm,
So during the day, if we have, 30, 40 people together and they're asking a lot of questions about spirituality, about ayahuasca, about the forest, about mythologies, about religions, about belief systems, about the universe, about science, I like to bring all of that in, and that becomes the thread for the
beautiful.
ceremony. And so then we also have the individual intentions that everyone's there for their own reasons. And so those are also in the ceremony. And that gives a context to it. Right?
Mm,
The ceremony itself has a nature of a container, which is both the ceremonial house and the jungle that's around it. And then it's spirit and great spirit that's part of it, and the calling to that. So there's a context, but within that, the thread is the things we've talked about and the intentions. Personally, you have to be a part of it. You can't be separate from it.
mm,
So everything you're doing, even down to the level of thought, impacts the ceremony. And
mm,
so to run the ceremony, you have to go through the ceremony yourself. That's the part of the journey that we take as the practitioner, as the shaman.
mm,
Although I think we relate to it a little differently than the way other people do, because we know how to hold it in a more abstract form.
mhm,
And so, for instance, like now I understand that those geometric patterns that I was seeing before hold a tremendous amount of information about what's going on in the room.
mm.
And so now, instead of being overwhelmed by them, we actually learn the languages of them. And the indigenous people created Ikaro as a language to
Yeah.
understand those patterns and be able to work with them. So a lot of the time I'll be seeing the patterns, and everyone's in the patterns, and all the information necessary to run the ceremony are in them. And all the insights are in them as well. And they're also in me. And so those insights can come through during the ceremony, or if there's anything going on. I mean, if we're going through a big collective purge and we're releasing things, like in the last retreat, there was a lot of need for forgiveness and then a lot of need for creating peace.
Mm,
We went through forgiveness one night, and then we went through peace another night. So anything in me that needed any kind of forgiveness in any way, shape, or form, over the last years was there. And then any conflicts that need to ultimately be resolved also show up. So as that kind of goes through, I think what happens is you just gain skills on how to be able to handle it with a little bit more grace.
mm,
And so from the outside, it doesn't look like you're probably having much happen, but inside you're still experiencing it. But you're like,
mm.
oh, forgiveness. Let's open up the heart. Let's, connect with divinity. Let's immediately connect with forgiveness and make that work.
And so are you feeling everything as well as guiding everybody else?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're feeling
Mm,
everything, you're sensing everything for yourself and for the entire group. It's not
yeah.
just one person or the other. It's a lot all together at the same time.
So then how do you walk away from that in the end? I mean, how does it not put a dent in you at the end of the day or at the end of the week when the ceremonies are over? Do you process it out there and then and let it go? Or does it stay with you? Or am I asking the right question? I don't know.
Yeah,
Can you
it does.
walk away
Yeah,
from
but
it in one piece, essentially?
yeah, you hear about this with, massage therapists and body workers and other kinds of energy workers, that they feel like there's this taxing nature to it, that they
Mm,
absorb it and that it
yes.
becomes somehow part of them, and there's a weight to it. So yeah, you, if you have, first of all, you have to learn to deal with that, and you have to
Yeah.
learn to be able to either, like, however you want to describe it, like repattern your own energies or release your own energies or remove your own energies, etc. You have to be able to do that. And then you also
Mm,
have to be able to create a certain amount of distance from the energies of everybody else.
mm,
And I ultimately just learned to frame it in a way where I understand that everybody's on the continuum of their worst all the way to their best of their best. And we're
mm,
there to deal with the worst of the worst all the way to the best of the best. And so we have to keep that in perspective. And I think as a society, we put too much credence and energy into the worst of the worst and the stories and identifications associated with it.
mm,
And we then retell that story millions of times instead of thinking about the millions of positive things happening every single day in the face of the fact that we've had the worst of the worst. And so what I
mm,
see is that really we have in our lives a tremendous amount of positive. We have a tremendous amount of supportive. We have a tremendous amount of the help of nature. We have a tremendous amount of help from earth et cetera, all the time. And that gives us the ability to identify with those deep traumas. And so I help people realize that there's many, many more positive experiences than negative ones. The negative ones are just very loud in our psyche.
Mm. What would you say to people who would maybe love to go to ceremony, but there's a couple of things holding them back? Maybe they're frightened. Maybe they have a physical ailment that won't allow them to partake in an ayahuasca ceremony. Maybe there's financial blockages or logistics. You know, how are there other ways that they could experience something like this, or are there other practices that would help them along the way?
First, certain plant medicines are not for everybody.
Mm.
And there are reasons for it. There's different drug interactions or medical interactions. There's different health problems that people have or health concerns that don't allow it. But there's a variety of plant medicines out there. And there are visionary plant medicines and non-visionary plant medicines. And you can take non-visionary plant medicines and you can bring them into your practice using breath work and other means to get into an altered state and be able to have a ceremonial state of consciousness. And then you can look for practitioners who do use visionary plant medicines of the kinds that you can use. And so, that gives you a lot more flexibility instead of just thinking like, oh, ayahuasca is the only solution for me, or this other plant medicine, but I can't take it and now I can't participate. I think we have to be more creative than that. And there are actually many more options out there, and they're growing and expanding. And so I just think we have to be open to that and, kind of understand that there's more than just what people are saying. So we have to look for it. There are psilocybin ceremonies, San Pedro Huachuma ceremonies, cannabis ceremonies now. Cannabis spirituality is starting to take off in those practices, and the revival of shamanic practices with cannabis, ayahuasca as well. And then there's many other, there are other plants that are also being used. So find ones that you can work with that could be supportive and helpful. I try always to explain that this is not a Western drug culture. It's not a party culture. It's not taking these substances for the purpose of taking drugs. And so it's not, oh, I want to take that drug or this drug. It's this plant medicine is very specific. It's a medicine, and I take it when I have a need for a medicine. The nice thing about them is that they have ways of helping us with needs that currently our pharmaceutical medicines don't do. So it might be foreign for somebody to think like, oh, I can go do a ceremony to go deal with a buildup of stress and issues that I've had in my psyche over the last 2, 3, 4 months or 3, 4 years, et cetera. But that's what this actually is for. That's what this works really well for. So I would just seek ceremonies that you can be a part of and have the experience. And then if you really don't feel called yet, you really feel like there are some blocks and it's not right for you, then it's not time to do it yet.
It's interesting. I had a very deep calling to go actually to South America. I think I was in my mid-20s. And I was booking tickets. I was there. And then I met my husband, my now husband, and it just took me a whole other, 15 years of a to come back around to it. But like, I truly believe it was the right time. At that time to do it. And it's a lovely point you made about the Western perspective about drug culture. And I really want to echo that as well, that I see plant medicine as really, really, really sacred. It's a really sacred thing. And I suppose I had a big spiritual awakening at the end of 2019. And I very, 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 very strongly came back to nature and the land and all that she holds for us and all that it offered me, and re-experience beautiful things that I had experienced as a child, just being on the land the whole time. So for me, it was to come back to nature and to the spirit of the plants and the trees in particular, and it just opened up this whole world of it being so sacred again. It just reignited that passion for me, So yeah, I don't see it as a Western, drug culture joyride. It's a game changer. It's very much, it'll change your life in very many ways. And it's probably worth saying as well that it can be quite destructive, but it breaks down the parts of your life that perhaps aren't working anymore,
Yeah, or you also have to understand that if you don't use this in a medicinal way, it can be very destructive. There are 2 known paths within it. There's the path of creativity, healing, growth, and development, and there's the path of destruction. And it's been very well codified by the indigenous lineages and the mestizo lineages. They know of it. And so if you treat it the wrong way, you get the wrong outcome.
Wow.
And so go to it with the right intentions. The intentions have a lot to do with the outcome that you get. And I think that it's hard for people to understand who haven't had the understanding of the spiritual awakening or the spiritual experience with it before going in. It is spiritual. You don't have to do anything special to make it spiritual. It's not the ritual around it that makes it spiritual. It's not the lighting of a candle that makes it spiritual. You go into the experience and you can be doubting and fearing. You can be thinking anything about it. It doesn't matter. The experience itself, once you're in the altered state of consciousness, awakens something that's innate in us. It's fundamental, it's powerful, and it's why we have the word spiritual. It's why people call it spirit or spiritual. It's something that's even deeper than the word and the rituals around it. And so I would just be open to that. And I've always said to people, you don't have to believe in this at all. You just have to think that there might be the chance or the possibility of change. So if you want positive change, but you don't believe in any of the stories that you've heard about it or anything, but you still would like its support and help, you just have to ask for help. Just say, please help me. I don't believe in this at all. Just please help me. And then have the experience. And from that, I think the majority of people come out of it recognizing that there was some kind of spirit or something greater to this experience.
100%. I remember the first time I did a psychedelic properly. I was shown God. And I come from a Catholic background, but I'm not religious. I don't consider myself religious, and I'm not. But it was so interesting. I was shown the power of the light and the dark in that one ceremony, and I was shown God, and I walked away with zero doubt in my mind. It was so interesting to come back around, You have a book, actually, which is lovely. When you talk about spirit, you've got plenty of books, and I got one online. It's one, Journey of One, Shifts in Consciousness, Insights from Shamanic Ceremonies. And it's really nicely written because it's just kind of one-liners, essentially. It's really, really lovely. But there's something I was flicking through, and I love to actually get this book. I come back to it all the time, and I just literally catch it, and I flick through it and land on a page and go, there we go. But this morning I flicked through it, and I earmarked it, and it's interesting that you just brought it up. And it was about spirituality. There's a little page on that. And I loved the insights in this. There was one that says, your life is already spiritual. It is like
that's simple.
Yeah, you've got such a succinct way of putting it. It's so great. I love this as well, even though I think non-spiritual people would balk at this, but I love this. Being spiritual and not being spiritual are spiritual.
That's true too.
It's so great. One I thought was really important. Spiritual does not mean good. Very good. There's a lot. There can be wolves in sheep's clothing in that world as well. So I thought that was a really succinct eye opener. That spiritual does not mean good. I like this. A spiritual person is no better than any other. So true. Sometimes you have this falsified spiritual superiority thing going on, which it almost leads to a spiritual ego, which can be so dangerous in itself. It's like, well, I'm spiritual, so I know, and it's like, no, there needs to be a bit of humble pie here. Yeah, it goes on. Honesty is the foundation for all spiritual growth. I thought that was lovely as well. A lot of humility and honesty. We talked a little bit about the different plants that you can use. And this is something that I've noticed that has come up with you in different interviews. You talked about dietas. I find dietas fascinating. I would love to try them. I just don't know if there's anybody, and if there is anyone offering them in Ireland, please do contact me. But I haven't found any, and I don't have a framework of reference because there's very little information online about dietas. And I'm not even talking about using psychedelic plants. It's more like I'd love to do a eucalyptus dieta or a cinnamon dieta or a rosemary dieta, just to really work with those plants. How do you even start to do that? Do you need a lot of support doing that? Or is it something you can do on your own if you have a bit of knowledge?
I think both. The process of dieta is a sacred transference of the energy, essence, or spirit of the plant to your body. So the tech metaphor I use is it's a download. It's the real download, like when you download
Yeah.
software into your phone. Not just a download of information, but like my phone didn't run that app before, and now my phone does. Well, the indigenous people learned how to pass that essence from a living tree to your body.
Wow.
And that's just a fascinating and really, really sophisticated thing they figured out through a process that's actually pretty simple. And so once you understand the process of dieta, then you can do the dieta on your own. I think it's just understanding the actual process of it. I have a dieta course. If somebody goes to bluemorphoacademy.com or bluemorphotours.com, you can get the course, and it walks you through how to do 3-day dieta, and you can make it as long as you would like from then, and how to work with the plants and how to hold ceremony associated with the plants. And it's all done through videos. And so you can learn that framework. And once you know the framework, you can apply it to all the different medicinal plants to be able to learn from them in this way. Basically, a dieta is reducing the number of calories that you eat, going into a kind of seclusion from normal activity and the stimulus of kind of normal life around you, so that you can be aware of subtler energies, especially when the plants are not visionary. Right? You think, well, I have cinnamon all the time. Why would this dieta be any different than adding cinnamon to my dessert or cinnamon to my drink or whatever, or my food? So you're entering into this communion with cinnamon or rose or thyme or mint or any of these other plants that are out there. And you want to be able to hear them. You want to be able to connect to their energy. You want to be able to know the difference of before drinking the tea to after drinking the tea. You make a tea out of them. You bless the tea. You invoke to the tea to really communicate the purpose of your dieta, the purpose and the intention that you have. You consume the tea, and then you're in the process of the dieta, and it's very much like a fast. So I think dieta often translates to diet, and people are like, well, what are you meaning? Well, it's really like a fast. So you go through the fast, and during the time of the fast, you eat a very reduced amount of calories or none, depending on the kind of dieta that you're doing. You can do water fasts, or you can do cleanses while you do this. And then you commune with the tea, you drink the tea, and you also then do different kind of meditative experiences or ceremonial experiences to connect with the plants. So the course that I offer is, designed for Western people's lives. So it's a 3-day, 4-day experience instead of what's often found in the Amazon 9, 15, 30-day experiences. That's harder for people to get away from.
Yeah.
And you can start to access the plants. You can use local plants. You can use local trees. You can use, plants that you buy online. And then you can also use different Amazonian plants.
Wow. What else is offered in your Blue Morpho Academy? Because I know you talk about a standardization of practice within ceremony, which I think is really important as well, because I think with the rise of psychedelics, they're kind of been offered, whoops, just knocked my mic. They're being offered kind of everywhere. How important is it to have a standard of practice and a code of practice? And what does Blue Morpho kind of offer when you do that?
Yeah, Blue Morpho Academy it's a academy for plant medicine. And we're growing as an academy. So we're continuously launching and offering more services. But right now we have certification programs, and the certification programs are to fulfill 4 key roles in the plant medicine space: the sitter, the coach, the facilitator, and master facilitator. And the standardization is to bring a foundation of best practices to the space, which currently doesn't have it. It's a not unregulated space. And there's no real core agreement. And it's very confusing for people who get into the space about the fact that there isn't a core agreement about safe practice, responsible practice, grounded practice, moral practice, et cetera. So they bring ethics and a code of conduct and understanding, and safety and professionalism is really the goal. And then help people in that go through the depth of training that they're interested in. So the sitter is the introductory level, and the sitting for people is really being the responsible, sober person, while other people have different kinds of psychedelic and plant medicine experiences. And coaching is advice giving, the before, during, and after. care associated with aligning somebody to this kind of experience. And facilitating is where you start getting into consuming the medicinal plants with your guests in your ceremonies and really becoming a ceremonialist. And then a master facilitator is the master of all of those roles. So a sitter and coach level can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and a master facilitator could be anywhere from 6 to 10 years of
Wow.
training.
Wow, that's quite
And
the commitment.
yeah, but you get into it little by little. I figure 1 out of 100 would ever be really interested in becoming a master facilitator once they get in and really understand it. So,
Mm,
go into the shallow end of the pool first and work your way to the deeper ends of commitment. So you could, have a role in the space in 3 to 6 months of training that could be very supportive and helpful. And it doesn't have to be a career. It can be something that you just want to do for yourself or for others. Like you have people are interested in having these ceremonies and experiences. People are starting to take psychedelics and visionary plants, and they want to know that they're doing it in a safe way. This is a great place to get trained, to know that you could offer that advice to your friends and family and help guide everybody to having a safer kind of experience and
mm.
ultimately a better outcome. And then we have a mystery school. The mystery school launches this month.
Wow.
And in a formal way, I've been hosting the mystery school already for a number of years, but privately. And so we're opening it now to the public this month. And the mystery school are for people that are interested in psychedelic exploration, personal growth and development, having mentorship, knowing that there's a lot more than just set and setting in the space, and they want guidance for themselves. And they want to
Mm,
do it in a group setting. They want to do it in a community and have the support and love of the community as well.
mm,
Often people feel isolated and alone in these kinds of experiences, or they don't know who to talk with about them, or they go on a retreat and they meet some people, but then they go back into their life and they don't have that community around them. And
mm,
so the mystery school is about going into the mysteries of plant medicines, the mysteries of consciousness, the mysteries of the universe, exploring them with collective intentions, holding group ceremonies and group virtual ceremonies, learning to hold space for each other, and then coming together for different gatherings in person and continuing that exploration.
wow.
So yeah, the mystery school is a really uh, it's a really beautiful thing that's coming together for the space.
It's
And then we have other courses. Sorry, go on.
no. I was going to say it sounds like a really beautiful thing, but please tell me more about the courses.
Yeah. So then we have a dieta course that teaches dietas and how to be able to do dietas at home.
Hmm.
And I think that's very powerful for people to learn that framework and be able to apply it. It's
Mm,
great for not only treating problems, but also preventing them. So you can
mm,
think of doing dieta, every couple of months as a way of really boosting your immune system and staying healthy. It's a
mm,
great way to stay connected with a greater level of connection with the plants and receive even greater benefit from them. And it also brings the ceremonial practice into your own home and teaches you more about it.
wow.
And then I have a course called Total Liberation, and it's the very best of everything I know about healing trauma and transcending trauma.
Wow. Wow. It's quite a lot to offer. Yeah, it's really, really amazing that you have this on offer. Like it feels fresh and new and interesting. How long did you train as a master shaman? How long did it take you?
Well, I had a very accelerated apprenticeship, and then I had a very, very long maturation phase.
Mm,
So my formal apprenticeship took me just under 2 years, and that's really unheard of.
wow,
In
yeah.
essence, like the metaphor would be, I skipped a lot of grades. Um, but then I was a very young person who was considered a master shaman, and so I had a very long maturation phase, which I
Mm.
think, if I look at all of it together, I would say took 13 or 14 years.
During that time, and this gets into a personal space, and you can tell me not to go there if you want, but during that time, so like it sounds, and you mentioned it a second ago where you said not everybody wants to go to that level. It sounds like it's all consuming, and it sounds like there's no room for anything else in your life. Would that be fair to say? Like this, is there room for family in your life, or is there room for partnership in your life when you are working at that level, which is very intense?
I think it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to maintain other kinds of relationships during that time.
Mm,
You become very focused. In my case, I was building and running Blue Morpho at the same time as
mm,
I was going through those phases. And so it became all consuming and all encompassing for me in my own life. Um, Part of it is personal focus, and then part of it is also just the continued development. You change so fast, so continuously. It's very hard for other people who aren't involved to keep up with you, because you're evolving in the way that you think, you're evolving in the way that you understand, your beliefs are changing. And you also have to give a lot during that time. So you're constantly of service. I think in a real apprenticeship, you're probably working 16-hour days,
Wow.
like legitimately focused and working 16-hour days. You're in and of service to all of the different tasks and needs, that amount, and the rest is sleep. So you apprentice and you sleep, and you apprentice and you sleep, and you give up this notion of having your own life. It's not really your own life anymore. It's the life you're living. And you have to continue that process. And so in the academy, I was very interested in creating roles that people could find that suit their lifestyle, instead of just everybody being an apprentice to be a master and then having 99% fail.
Yes.
Which is the indigenous way. So I wanted to change that to, it's not all or nothing. And the indigenous way was all or nothing. You start trying to become a master shaman, and if you fail, you're done. And then you go to a different thing in life. Whereas I thought for Westerners, we have a very different outlook on life. And we could have a notion that you can learn these skills, but you don't have to fully master, you don't have to become a master of all of the different arts for a tribe to be able to practice and get benefit from these kinds of plant medicines.
Wow. Okay. So in the Live Well podcast, we have, it's called the quick fire round. It's the end of the interview, and it's a quick fire round. So are you ready?
Let's go.
Do you believe in magic?
Yes.
What's the wildest thing you've ever done?
Ayahuasca.
Yeah. Me too, I think. Yeah. If you were to distill yourself down to an essence, what would that essence be?
The universe.
Oh, whoa. Someone else said cheese once. That's a far cry from the universe.
Although it's just quickly, I would say that that's shared amongst all of us.
Yeah,
I think that's the same for us all.
What do you stand for?
Love.
Beautiful. What one thing do you do every day that helps you live wild and free?
Drink water.
Drink water.
Mm.
Can you elaborate
Water's
on that?
Gaia's essence. Yeah, water's Gaia's essence.
Mm.
Water's how we live at all. When you understand the spirit of water, you understand how life was formed and why we're made of water. So if you know the water and you connect with the water, you are the water.
Wow.
And that is the essence of everything that's wild and free. That's the wild and free forest. Those are all the wild and free animals. That's the wild and free ocean.
I think we have to leave it there, because they couldn't get more perfect than that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure, an absolute joy. And I know you got up very early in the morning because you're over in Peru. And thank you. It was a beautiful conversation and an eye-opener.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be on the podcast.
Thank you for being here. We hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed making these episodes. Thank you, as always, to our amazing guests. A special thank you to Aoife McNamara, my co-producer extraordinaire from Imagine Media. Please like, share, subscribe, and rate us. It all really helps. And remember, this content is for education and entertainment purposes. In short, it's not gospel. I always say, take what resonates with you and leave the rest. Always question everything and do your own research.